Good morning and welcome to today's HIMSS20 virtual lightning session presentation, Improving Strategic Alignment in C-Suite Reporting. Your speaker today is Carlos Escobar, Senior Continuous Improvement Specialist with Inova Health System. Before I turn things over to Carlos, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for replay next week. All attendees will be on mute for the entirety of the webinar. If you have a question, please submit them via the Q&A text box to the right of the screen at any time during the presentation, and we will address them during the Q&A portion at the end. As a follow-up to today's presentation, you will also receive an email that includes a PDF of today's presentation and the recording. Thank you so much for joining us, and with that, Carlos will start today's presentation.
Hello, my name is Carlos Escobar. I'm a continuous improvement specialist at Inova Health System. We have been in a journey with MEDI for about a year, a little over a year, and we've implemented them across our entire enterprise. We have about 2,000 people in our organization. We have our biggest hospitals, about 1,000 beds, and we have other hospitals within the Northern Virginia area. And the need that we had initially was satisfied by what MEDI has been able to develop for us. However, this is work in progress, and we're still working on making further improvements to the tool. What I wanted to show is what we've been able to do with the C-Suite and how our metrics have been communicated more effectively in comparison to what we had done before historically. So the screen that you see here is a dashboard or a scorecard that we've been able to put together from MEDI. And this view here is a compilation of different sources that come from external as well as internal databases that we have. Things like the CDC hosts, for example, infections information. We have Presgani holding survey and patient satisfaction numbers. We also have internal financial data. And we have our people data, which is pretty much human resources information, things like turnover, leaders leaving us, and things like that. So traditionally, we used to have a system where every single one of these metrics would be reported separately. And if they were consolidated to some extent, it would actually be broken apart by hospital. Our system is mainly 5 hospitals, and each one of them would actually have a separate update, which means that the C-suite would have to meet with hospital leadership individually, which meant 5 meetings separate. And then those meetings would actually take their own escalations, and there was not much continuity into those meetings. Now we have this scorecard right here, which compiles all our metrics into one single view. This report is sent to all of our leaders, and those 5 reports that we used to have individually now become one single meeting that happens once a month. So we've been able to simplify 5 individual 1 to 2 hour meetings into one single, I believe it's 3 or 4 hour meetings, because this is not the only item on that agenda, but it's definitely a simplification and an improvement over the process we used to have before. So what you can see here is, just based on the color coding, is whether we've been meeting target on certain hospitals or not. And the benefit about having this is that some hospitals actually have a reference point from other hospitals to see if they've done something better than them, or if they've actually reached target. They can actually reach out to those hospitals and see within the tool itself the work that's been happening, and hopefully bring in any best practices, or see anybody that's struggling and actually be able to share with other hospitals any work that has been done. So we have actually been able to have a lot more communication in between hospitals, because this is a good visual that tells them where they are in comparison to others, and if they can bring in any goodness into their own. This view is summarized again for the entire enterprise, all hospitals. The next view is really just a more specific version to a specific hospital. So what I mean by that is the previous screen that I showed you only showed our year-to-date metrics. So are we up to the month throughout the year on target to what we set ourselves. But if we wanted to see more specific information, things like trends, things like how we do this month in comparison to the year, what is the work that is actually happening? This is the screen, the scorecard that would actually get. What the leaders receive is the scorecard that I showed you initially, and 5 of these, 1 for each hospital. So every hospital leader knows more in detail how other hospitals are doing. So there's better transparency. There's also the opportunity for people to actually see how the projects are going. So if you look to your right, there's a project status column that tells you by project how first of all, the status of them, so whether they've been complete, on schedule, at risk, or late. And then once they click on that, they're able to see any progress on those projects and the work that's actually happening, as well as the leaders and any risks. Those projects are, most of them, and we're still in the process of making sure that is a common practice to build, as much relevant detail as possible into a tool. But a good project populated into MEDI has timelines that are current, has updates that are current, and has notes within it that says any specific information that is useful to somebody managing a project or somebody that needs to take that project and probably implement it somewhere else. They could actually take that as well. So having this scorecard here, again, it shows you a little bit more data. This kind of avoids that knee-jerk reaction of people having 1 month go bad, but the trend and the year-to-date numbers actually not be so bad. So that avoided a little bit that reaction of people chasing the month's number as opposed to chasing trends. This view has helped us get there. Again, it's a culture change, so we're not quite there yet, but in comparison to what used to do before, we're actually in a much, much better place. Another view that we like and we've actually used within our executive team is Plan Explore. We've actually worked with the MEDI engineering team, and they've actually made changes to this view and worked very well with us. We're still working on it, but they've made some changes that have actually been very useful for us. The reason why this is useful is because this is an interactive view of the work that's been happening. So as you can see there, you can actually interactively explode or collapse different what we call work programs, projects, and action steps. And I believe each enterprise may use different terminology for it. But you can actually collapse everything just to see everything at a high level. And then if you wanted to see more, instead of flipping through pages, you can just expand the area of interest and then see status reports and see how they connect to different metrics and see, all kinds of stuff as well as notes. This view is very useful because whenever we have to have, for example, an executive report where we just don't have the time to scroll through pages, having a handout of all the initiatives down to the 3rd level detail is a lot of information to give an executive. So this one actually allows us to explode or collapse, like I said. So if people want to just glance through some of them, if they know they're on track, we don't have to have the entire detail, but if some of them might pique interest in them, we blow it up and then we see what's going on there. So this view has also been used a lot. It's something what we're using for our strategic initiatives for 2020. This is something that it's still work in progress, like I said. We don't have 100% compliance on this, but as executives see a trend and see an expected report, things that are not working or things that are not as that people are not catching up to, then those things are actually given attention and escalated, and then that's how we can get the culture moving a lot more. The point of this graphic here is to show what we used to have before MEDI came into the picture and helped us with this issue. So reporting of the metrics, so the way that scorecard or the information that scorecard was put together was through a lot of external sources, a lot of manual work where people would have to get information, pull it from a system, pull it into an Excel sheet, then pull it into another person's Excel sheet to validate, and then record that into a PowerPoint presentation that would go and be gathered with all the other areas. So that process that I just explained times 4, because we have human resources, we have finance, we have patient experience, and we have quality. And then that would be actually given to our leaders. Again, that's by hospital. So that is times 5 now, because we have 5 hospitals. So that process was very iterative in nature. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of delays because of the amount of manual work, especially because if somebody's busy, then it only takes, one person to delay the entire process and an entire presentation that needs to be given to the hospital leaders. The process that we have now is a little bit more streamlined. So this is a process where you have your external sources. Everybody uploads their Excel files, what we call flat files, and they go into Medi. This slide is actually a intermittent phase between what we're doing now and what we want to do in the future, which is to streamline the communication between those sources and Medi. And this is something we're going to be developing, alongside Medi within the next couple of months. That's the reason why my face is sad, is because we'd like to see something that is more automated into the system, but this is something that we've decided to take, a step forward. And again, this is something that we're just going to be working on the development. But as of now, the current process is on one specific day of the month, all the data that comes into Medi is given by users, owners of the data. And as soon as that data is uploaded, then all the leaders can actually hit refresh in their own screens and see the most current information. So that's the current process, as opposed to all this, work that I just explained earlier. Our leaders really like it. We've set up shortcuts into their computers so they can just click on the shortcut and they can see the status for all their hospitals. There's a scorecard function within Medi that also lets them collapse and explore metrics. So very similar to what the Plan Explorer view is. You can actually do this very similar with the scorecard results, and they're able to just engage with their own leaders and ask questions or ask for barrier removal, or like I said, the biggest piece of this is sharing best practices with other leaders. All right.
Absolutely.
Colin, is there anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Carlos, and for everyone on the call. My name is Colin Mtupi. I'm the account executive working with Carlos at Innova Health System. So as Carlos so eloquently mentioned, one of the key elements that we set out to do was enhance their executional excellence. And as clearly mentioned, transparency was a huge benefit so far that we have experienced. For folks asking on the call, how do I create a one-stop shop to manage my organization's disparate initiatives? As you've seen, the application will allow us to look at enterprise-wide planning initiatives, whether they are your strategic plans, your performance improvement plans, or even point quality and patient safety collaboratives that you have across your organization. Enter those into the application, and one of the key elements is then tying your key performance indicators or metrics to those plans so that you can titrate your execution relative to your outcome, as Carlos explained with the scorecards. Then the executive level summary views, how are you able to then take that information and package it in a easy and efficient way for executives to then consume it and make appropriate decisions in a timely manner, given their competing priorities on any given day. We didn't get into this, but some of the scorecards that Carlos showed, you're able to drill down into more specific views. So if you're looking at the health system view, you can look at the performance at all of your specific facilities that roll up for that given metric that is being tracked. So is the execution of the plans that are associated with those metrics, drilling down from a system view down to an individual facility or department if need be. And then lastly, as mentioned on the graphic that Carlos showed with the process prior to implementation and post, the ability to streamline your monthly operating reviews, both in regard to the quantity and quality of data coming in, and more specifically in the process itself of running your monthly executions. From a nutshell, and the last slide there, Carlos, if we go down, from a big picture standpoint, if I was to take a step back and just say, right, what's the mental model of the application that has been implemented at Innova? I like to think about it in this closed loop sense. So the ability to integrate your planning reporting, enhancing your communication and performance improvement so as to accelerate your execution across your strategic initiatives. And what we do is at the very top of that closed loop circle on the left, your pillars and strategic plans are ingested into the solution. Each of those would have either your initiatives and those initiatives, and some organizations might call them objectives or strategies, depending on the nomenclature in your organization, would then have very specific metrics or key performance indicators tied to them. That then highlights the focus for where you as an organization will be paying your specific attention in regard to driving your performance. And those metrics would then help you with the execution portion, which is what are the specific action steps and plan status tracking elements that you need to build to constantly look back during your monthly operating reviews and ask the questions if those executional activities are resulting in the needed outcomes as measured by your key metrics on your initiatives or objectives as identified. So that's the execution portion of it. What we then also looked at during this call were some of the components within the solution that allow for whether it's the leadership and accountability and the ability to track and analyze your data on a monthly cadence so as to right size and correct the execution and remove any monuments or barriers from the execution path of your associates across the system. This is completed by a number of things, whether they are dashboards, scorecards, or alerts, as we looked at in Innova's case, in order to ensure that you are appropriately adjusting and communicating priorities in a timely manner to ensure that success at the end of your year. From an improvement and productivity standpoint, and I know there might be a few questions out there in regard to kind of lessons learned from Innova that I'll let Carlos kind of touch on a little bit. Definitely improving productivity. The last two slides from Carlos's screen paint a picture of the current state prior to the application and then kind of how it is right now. There's still always improvement, and both Carlos and I are trained in performance improvement, so we know 50% improvement today is better than waiting for years for perfection. So we've already kind of moved closer to that improvement level, and there's still a little more work to be done to kind of even improve that process further, and we are committed to doing that. But there's definitely clear improved productivity in regard to ensuring successful monthly operating reviews across the system. And then, of course, the efficiency of running the reports and your performance over time, the ability to look at your key performance indicators or your metrics and seeing tangible results to your bottom line based on the success of the execution. So with that kind of paints a big picture of the enterprise performance management solution from Medi Analytics, backstopped or a foundational discussion from Innova's use case. I will now open it or pass it back to Samantha to share any questions that might have come from the panels and also specific lessons learned back to Innova or myself. I also have a colleague, Kevin Rotert, who is our product owner, that some of the questions might be addressed to him. So Samantha, I'll pass it back to you for any comments.
Thank you, Carlos and Colin. As a reminder, if you have questions, please submit them now via the Q&A text box to the right of the screen. We have had some questions come in. So the first question is, what kind of team alignment improvements have you seen from implementing EPM?
Team alignment and improvement. So what we have seen so far, most of the results that we have seen are actually around the awareness and the proactivity around our metrics. Because our metrics are a lot faster because they're communicated throughout the organization pretty much immediately once they get loaded into the system, as opposed to having people wait for different reports and all these metrics be buried within emails. That's created a sense of urgency to actually look at metrics a lot faster. And like I mentioned initially, to compare yourself against other hospitals and other organizations, look for metrics that affect them as well, and see how they can actually partner up with those hospitals to kind of bring the entire health system up. So there's been increased teamwork from that, but I think the main driver comes from being able to have those metrics available at a much quicker rate than we used to before.
Thank you. All right, our next question is, with EPM, can you sort data by individual manager, by department, et cetera?
Yeah, so what we use, and I don't know if I've used this capability to its fullest, and Colin, you might jump in if you want, but yes, you can. There's two different ways that we were able to do that. You can do that with, there's a screen within the EPM tool. It's called My Focus, which brings a specific person or specific leaders' initiatives into one place. That avoids the need of a person having to go and explore through all the strategies and see what their name is listed and updating them. So that makes their task of updating their results a lot more efficient. You can also run reports where is a more static kind of report where you can actually load the information as of the moment that the data was put in. So at the moment you run reports, that's the latest you're going to get. But that's going to be put into a static format. What I mean by that is either a PDF or an Excel file, something that can be exportable, and that information then is shared with leaders as well. That information is also being useful by some leaders, not all, but you can actually set these reports to be programmed to become what the system calls subscriptions, which is you can actually have a leader on every Friday or whatever the current date they want, receive a report of the state of their group as of the moment of that email pushed to their inbox. The benefit of that is leaders not having to go into a tool and having to click around, and people that maybe are not as familiar with the tool, they find this very easy because all they get is just an email with a targeted criteria of a report into the inbox, and they can just take action on that.
Fantastic. Okay, we have time for one more question, unless I heard Colin or Kevin, did you have additional comments?
No, Carlos, you're right on.
Okay, perfect. The last question, just so we're on time, is, was training staff on use of this system difficult or easy?
Oh, that's a good question. It was not difficult to the extent that the tool is not hard to learn. So the learning curve on this is very short. It doesn't take too much to actually understand it. From that point is easy. Now, from a culture change and a change in most of the practices that we've done before, it's become a little difficult. And what I mean by that is people have been using their own systems. People are used to their own ways of updating their information. And this is a new process that we didn't just flip the switch and went into Medi. So there's been some time where we've had to run dual reporting, and that was by design because we didn't want a new tool to just take on, and then any shortcomings would just make the tool fail. So we wanted to run it in parallel for a little bit and then let go of the old process. That piece has been a little bit difficult, again, because it's just a change in the nature that we run business at Innova, and that's still a struggle to some extent. Our implementation curve has been shifting to the right place. I think more people see it, be more value added, especially if our leaders see the value, then and they ask for updates, then people will tend to use the tool a lot more. But the training is only so much. On the training, we kind of show the infrastructure and how it's done. But I think for actually adopting the tool itself, I think support from leaders and actually knowing that leaders are looking and using the data that's in the system has been the main driver for us to actually get it implemented. Again, people have their own ways of doing things from traditional methods. And if they had their way, they would always gravitate towards that unless, we have pressure to go in here. And then once we get used to the system, then people tend not want to go back. But it's a big change for us.
That's exactly right, Carlos, and I think you're absolutely right. And the one thing we always say is, there's definitely a cultural change component to the performance management system for all of the reasons that Carlos has illustrated. Past behavior, and also the notion that Carlos mentioned earlier about transparency. A lot of people kind of love to keep the data to themselves and own the data in the Excel documents or their PowerPoint. So the fact that it's now transparent in a specific solution definitely has some change management components that organizations need to think about. One question that has come in from the participants as well was, what specific Medi Analytics product does Innova have? And at the moment, Innova is using our Enterprise Performance Management solution, which is called EPM. We have additional products that are in the revenue cycle space, in the population health space, and those are more analytically driven from our platform. Most of those products will also have EPM integration to them. So in the event that you have our revenue cycle product, let one of your account managers or your sales rep know, and we can definitely look into the integration of EPM to those other solutions as well.
Thank you, Colin. All right, at this time, there's no more questions. I'd like to thank you all for your participation and questions. As a reminder, we will send you a PDF and recording of today's presentation. Thank you again for joining us. You may now disconnect.